Shout out to Snowball, our incredible new sponsor, a private community where top entrepreneur investors share private deal flow, wins, tough lessons, strategies, get advice, and so much more. Check out www.snowballclub.com. Let's grow together with Snowball. Hello, and welcome to the How to Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. And now a moment for our sponsors. I want to highly recommend you get Acquisition Aficionado magazine. Every month, Acquisition Aficionado magazine brings you tactics for business buying and selling you won't find anywhere else. Learn firsthand from industry leaders who share their success stories, featuring in-depth interviews and stories from leading figures in the business acquisition industry. This multi-platform mobile magazine speaks to acquisition entrepreneurs wherever they are in the journey. And I want you to visit acquisitionaficionado.com today. Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Ralph Yarusso, and we're going to talk about franchising and the benefits of buying a franchise and how to grow well through the franchising model. There's a lot of unknowns there. Thank you for being on the show today. A lot of people don't understand the concept of franchising and how you can do just more than one store and how you can buy them and sell them and how you can truly create wealth. So I'm looking forward to getting into this conversation, Ralph. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We always start off with the bio, like your background, kind of how you ended up here. The standing joke is you were born, now you ended up on a podcast about buying and selling companies. Can you kind of explain the gap in between there?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. Yeah. So out of high school, I actually joined the Air Force and I was fortunate enough to test out and become a C-141 air crew member. So I flew in the Air Force C-141s for about 9 years. It was just an incredible experience and opportunity for a young guy. And, I really enjoyed that. I got to see the world essentially. After exiting the Air Force, I did 4 years active duty and 5 years of reservist. After my 4 years of active duty, I went to school, got my certification with the FAA for flight control, flight dispatch, got a job at LaGuardia and was working there and things were humming along. But then was looking at the probability of having to move to Houston. My wife was pregnant with our first baby at the time, and it just made sense for us to maybe explore some other opportunities. So we started studying some franchise opportunities. We had an opportunity to look at a Meineke franchise at the time, and we decided to take the plunge and join that car care chain back. This was all the way back in 1985 now, and took advantage of my military honorable discharge. Was able to get nice discount on my franchise license fee, and I was off and running. I ended up as a Meineke franchisee with my first store. We opened in 85 and continued growing that. I had a second store in 88 over a 23-year span. I ended up owning 15 of them across two states. We expanded out to Colorado, where I opened most of my stores, had 13 in Colorado. Along the way, I was able to buy dirt and build buildings or buy buildings and grow that net wealth, like you mentioned earlier. It did real well and made store managers owners, made family members owners, and really enjoyed that entire history as an entrepreneur, growing and coming out of the military. Candidly, Ronald, I'm not a mechanic. I'm like the last guy you want working on your car. And here I am, a Meineke franchisee, owning all these businesses. But the franchise model, and this is systemically, they train people and how to run a business. If you're working on cars and you own a car franchise, you're probably not following the model the right way. You need to be recruiting people. Most McDonald's owners aren't flipping burgers, I can assure you. So I was able to build teams and provide good customer service. And I think that that's why I enjoyed the success that I did. And it worked out very, very well for me. After I exited, I was then recruited and moved into some corporate executive roles, mostly as chief operating officer for three different brands, both in the automotive and fitness space. and I did that for another 15 years. So now what? So
Hmm.
now I coach and mentor, and specifically do a lot of work with veterans as well in their journey to become business owners and franchisees, holding their hands. I wish I had a mentor back in the day when I got started. It would have obviously circumvented a lot of aggravation, a lot of learning, trial by fire. But I really enjoy what I do because I'm passionate about helping folks in that journey and making sure that they don't make those mistakes along the way.
For those of you my listeners out there, if you're new out there, I'm an Air Force veteran also, so a lot of people may have already heard that throughout the shows, or if you're new here, you haven't heard that. So I love the idea of helping veterans get into the franchising model. I'm 52. I got into buying and selling companies through the hard way, right? I failed at more companies than I succeeded at, starting. And there's something to be said about the franchise model because anybody that knows that when you start a business, there's a lot of things you have to figure out, right? You have to figure out product market fit. Does the consumer base out there really even care about what you're selling? Then do you have a market? Then you figure out your pricing, what pricing works and what's the sweet spot in the pricing model that keeps you profitable or keeps you the most profitable you can, but still does a good service for the customers. There's all these different things. And then when you step into a franchise model, most of that, if not all of it's figured out for you. It's just done, and it's a proven there's a proven product market fit. There's a proven a lot of these franchises will even analyze where you're gonna put the location and make sure fits the model, and they'll be able to tell you, "Hey, that's not a great location for one," or, "Hey, yeah, it's a perfect spot." There's just so much more support in this structure. Can you share with us some of the, different, support structures that these franchise models have that's different from starting something on their own?
Sure, I'm happy to. There's a few cliches out there. The first one being the franchisor does all the blocking and tackling for you. The next one being you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And there's a lot of truth to that. When you think about owning a business, you want to be able to work on it and not necessarily in it. Having a franchisor behind you, providing research and development on technology, marketing, advertising, operational training, P&L review, all of these different aspects of owning a business, you don't have that when you're an independent operator. You're 80% more likely to fail as an independent operator than you would be as a franchisee. Now, a lot of people say, well, I got to pay royalties. You're paying for a product and a service. And at the end of the day, those franchisors are truly concerned and want to be assured that you have every opportunity for success. They use a lot of sayings like, we give you the toolbox, but as the franchisee, you need to be able to open it and use the tools. So, following the system of operation, it's already laid out. The hardest thing is people that try and reinvent the wheel because you don't need to. It's okay to tweak it and put your personal flair on certain things. But when it comes to product, customer service, it's all right there for you. So, yeah. And that's one of the reasons why veterans are so attractive to franchisors because they understand SOPs, standard operating procedures for the acronym. They have the discipline to follow those models, take orders, if you will, and be more entrepreneurial.
It's a lot more well known now because of Gino Wickman's work in the book Traction and the EOS system that they put out. For a long time, it's always existed. There are entrepreneurs which tend to want to be creative. They're visionaries. They want to create something, and there are operators. And this is just what I've seen from self observation, even outside of the EOS system. But every good business I've ever seen that's actually grown and scaled and had multiple locations, I can walk in there within 30 to 40 minutes of walking in the front door. I can tell you who the entrepreneur is, who's the visionary that had the idea, and then who the real operator is. There's somebody in that. Sometimes it's the wife, sometimes it's the office manager, but somebody is the hyper organized, get everything done, put systems of processes together, the repeatable. Your average entrepreneur doesn't repeat anything. So the reason I bring this up is I think there's a lot of guys, especially if you've been in the military more than a couple of years, you're trained to be great operators. So to step into a franchise, you don't have to be that visionary. You don't have to create the new idea. You don't have to solve new problems all the time. You just have to be a really good operator. Whereas myself, I'm 100% entrepreneur. Every time I get a good business, I have to hunt out and hire a good operator. Because if you ask me to do the same thing 4 times in a row, the first time I'll nail it, I'll get it good, and from that, there's a declining, you know, um, accuracy and declining because I get really bored with things really fast. So I think that this is a perfect opportunity for anybody who is very systematic, organized, or especially you're trained in that in the military, right? I probably would have been a better franchise owner coming straight out of the Air Force than I am now that I've been out for 25, 30 years and that went back to my old ways. But talk about you call is it Vet Friends? I'm going to butcher that name. You're actually
Yeah,
part of Friends Vet or something like that. Vet
VetFran.
Fran. Yeah.
VetFran is a committee that's part of the foundation, the Educational Foundation, which is the International Franchise Association. So VetFran is an organization that, and you don't have to be a veteran to be a member of it. And if you would like to visit, just go to vetfran.org, and it's real easy to navigate around through that website to see what they offer and do. But essentially, their advocacy for veterans, their educations for veterans, and they also encourage franchisors to provide special programs for veterans to get into business. Kind of a thank you for your service to to the country. A lot of veterans, especially since 9/11, have extended, I'm sorry, a lot of franchisors have extended those veteran programs to first responders as well, firemen, police, even medical workers after COVID. So VetFriend is essentially is a conduit for folks to explore veteran opportunities, have that mentorship, and also especially encourage the franchisors to provide programs for veterans to find their pathway into franchising.
It's interesting. One of the reasons I got into this space is, like I said, I'm 52. I just turned 52 a couple weeks ago, but I'm old enough now where I don't want to play the game of okay, I got a good startup idea. My wife's trying to get me to help her do a startup right now. She wants, of all things, she wants me. We live a very interesting lifestyle. She wants me to help her buy a themed food truck, and I was like, that's a lot of work. So we'll get into that maybe another.
There's a couple of franchises that offer that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe I'll chat with you afterwards and see what's out there because yeah, so a themed food truck where we are the only one of the main reasons is about 5, 6 years ago, we actually changed our lifestyle to be a mobile lifestyle. This studio I'm sitting in can be picked up and taken with me. It's a 10-foot by 10-foot mobile studio, and then our house is a tiny home, 360 or 380. It's a small tiny home, and we can take it with us, and we've lived in Texas and Oklahoma and now in California, and we move where we wanna go, and the food truck would be a business that we could take in wherever we wanna go, we can go set it up, so she thinks
sure.
that fits the model. I don't think she has a degree in hospitality management and restaurant management, that's what her bachelor's degree is in, so it's not like she's unknowledgeable in the subject, but, I see it as a lot more I think it's a lot more work than she expects. That said, talk about the growth opportunities inside of building wealth inside of franchising. A lot of people think that they're gonna be capped to one location. Like, I meet constantly, with this show, with the business networking thing that we do for acquisition entrepreneurs and stuff, and most of them view franchising as a very limiting model. Let's dispel that myth. How can we create true wealth through a franchising model?
Well, obviously, the more successful a business is, the more wealth you gain, or the more valuable that business becomes. Many of these franchises are selling anywhere from 3 to 5 times a multiple of earnings. So there's that growth opportunity. Multiple unit ownership and multiple brand ownership is also a real popular growth aspect. They call them mumbos, multiple unit, multiple business owner, where it's very common, especially in the food space, where you own a Taco Bell and you also own a Kentucky Fried Chicken. I know folks. I have a friend of mine who owns a Grease Monkey Quick Lube and also a Hardee's restaurant. I mean, it's very possible. So building that wealth and growing that footprint is very feasible, especially when you can do it with multiple brands. But there's also another caveat to that, and that's real estate. Many franchisors, like McDonald's, for example, they're in the real estate business. They're not really in the hamburger business. But there's a lot of franchise models out there that offer brick and mortar models that allow you to, buy a piece of dirt, build a building, or buy an existing and convert it and run that business out of that building. And at some point in time, and I'm really fortunate to be one of those folks, I invested, and in lieu of paying rent, I paid a mortgage. The business paid that mortgage down to zero. Now I own some commercial buildings and I sell the businesses at a nice multiple. And I've got an asset that's going to pay me a rental income in perpetuity. So I don't know where that myth came about, but I can tell you there's a lot of very, very wealthy ex franchisees, as well as current franchisees, but folks that have exited the model and enjoyed some really great exit strategies.
And there's some really prolific one of the probably top acquisition entrepreneurs on the planet is somebody most people wouldn't see as one, right? It's Shaquille O'Neal, right? Shaquille O'Neal is an
Oh, yeah.
incredible acquisition entrepreneur, former basketball player, but I think he's in the total of 400 or plus, you know, businesses, and the majority of them are some form or another franchises, Krispy Kreme
That's right.
donuts. I think he has some Papa John pizza places. He definitely has one of the more not Kentucky Fried Chicken, but one of the other chicken franchises. He
He
owns a
started
lot.
his own, actually. It's called Big Chicken. Yeah.
Does he?
So,
I say
and Drew
he has
Brees is just along the same way. Drew
yeah,
Brees has done the same thing. Yeah.
yeah. So, and a lot of these guys that don't get that, there's a real reason out there. And the other side of it is a lot of people. I'm trying to think how I put this. One of the guys I talked to said he's really not an entrepreneur. So he calls me and says, "Hey, I really want to get an acquisition entrepreneurship." He came out of the military, and I said, "Well, cool. Tell me about your ability to start a business. What do you know? What do you know about finances?" He goes, "I just don't want to work for anybody else." I was like, "Cool, but what do you know about running and operating a business?" And he's like, "Well, I'll figure it all out." It's like, "That's awesome, but what do you know? Where's your starting point?" And so we were chatting for a little bit. So I just told the guy, I said, "You really ought to probably look at franchising." He said, "Why?" I said, "'Cause you don't have entrepreneurs that get into this, they have one of 2 things. They can't work for somebody else like he can't." He's like, "He just doesn't believe he could be a good employee. He's done with that." I said, "The second thing is they have a real problem in the world they wanna solve." And it jumps sometimes when one doesn't work, we always find another problem to solve in the world. And because you don't have that, you don't have this burning problem that you think the world needs solved, I would recommend you go the franchising route. And the reason is because this is gonna get real hard. When you started a business, there's gonna be times where it's just not working. And the only reason that, the entrepreneurs stick with these things is we truly believe in our solution for the problem in the world we're trying to solve, and we plow through it, we figure it out. Sometimes we win, sometimes we don't. But for these entrepreneurs who don't have a cause already, this is a brilliant way for them to go. And no, the other thing is he goes, "Well, I don't wanna start new." Like, that's one of the reasons I didn't want to a franchise doesn't sound good because I don't wanna go buy a piece of land, hang up a Meineke or a Jiffy Lube sign and be that's not actually, you don't have to. Franchises sell all the time. You can buy an existing business that's up and running, but have this and it's got profit and it's got employees and everything's already figured out, but the owner's retiring out of it, and it happens to be a franchise where you got the support, right? That is very possible, that you don't necessarily have to be the guy that scouts a location, builds a building, and does all the stuff that you're worried about. There's plenty of them out there that are for sale that you still have to go to buy your franchise license, you still have to go through their training, and you still get their support, but you're acquiring something that's up and running.
Yeah. A couple of comments on that. First of all, with respect to after I sold my franchises and what's next, before I got recruited to be a chief operating officer for a franchise, my wife was like, well, you know everything about business now, so you don't need to. Why don't we just open up another business and not do a franchise? I would never do that for all the reasons that we mentioned before. I want the support, the operations, the training, the marketing. I want that team of people essentially supporting me so I can focus on the business. So that's just to kind of expand on where you were going with before on that. But yeah, with respect to buying a business, there's a couple of different ways you need to look at that, Ron. And I always like, everybody's heard of the SWOT analysis:
Mm,
strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that's really, I encourage anybody that's looking at doing a resale to try and exercise that drill. When I look at them, a lot of folks are trying to, I want to buy a really high performing store. You're going to pay a lot for it, and you better have a plan on how you're going to make it better because you're going to be adding debt service. Then there's those distress sales. When I came to Colorado, I had an opportunity to buy 3 locations at one time. The franchisee was going through a divorce. It was a sticky situation. I got here and I visited the stores. And Ron, I'm telling you, they were a mess. I walked in the first store and they had a back seat of a station wagon is what customers sat on in the waiting room while they were waiting for their car to be fixed. They needed to be painted. The employees had no uniforms, they no inventory. It was distressed and purely an asset sale. Now, a lot of people would have turned around and walked right out and said, "This is disgusting. I'm really not interested in it." But I looked at it and said, "This is beautiful," because I can very quickly in my mind do a SWOT analysis and I can see the strengths, the
Mm.
location. There's employees and staff, and I can see the weaknesses, the culture, everything about with their operation. I could fix all of that stuff really quickly. So where do you grow net wealth more quickly? Buying a high volume unit that's doing very, very well and you're paying top dollar for it, or an opportunity to fix something that may be broken. I quadruple sales in 6 months in those locations. It was easy. I put inventory, I put people in uniforms. I changed the culture very, very quickly, made it a family type environment for the folks to work in. The worst part about that whole story is that the guy that sold the businesses, his name was Ralph and my name was Ralph. So I had to basically say, this is the all new and improved Ralph running these businesses now. But the franchisor was ecstatic because obviously I took those stores, turned them around. It was a distressed market, and I was off and running and developing that Denver market. So I grew net wealth very, very quickly that way. So you have to have a good peripheria in how you're looking at these businesses and the opportunities that they offer.
I can see where there's a difference between that and buying a distressed turnaround business in the non-franchise world, and that's because you have a proven system. You know what uniform to put them in. You knew what the marketing should be. You knew what the lobby should look like. You knew what the painting scheme should look like, right? To where if you step into I commonly tell people, unless you've turned around 4 or 5 companies, buying a turnaround's a bad idea, right, in the normal world, because you've gotta figure all that stuff out, right? You don't have any national brand to lean back on to where buying a franchise, I kinda see the light at the end of the tunnel here. There's a national image people expect when they walk in that door, and they're not getting it. There's a disconnect. You get to restore that to where if you buy a single operator location, there's a brand that it's built up over time, and you gotta overcome it. So, I think there's a real opportunity in buying distressed franchises that doesn't exist in buying distressed single operation companies.
You just have to have a plan. And that's part of the opportunities, part of the SWOT analysis. What are the opportunities? What's the plan? How are we going to do that? And really understanding the threats. When people look at threats, they typically gravitate towards what's the competition. What threats could be road construction, municipality changes, you know, um, hourly wages. There's a lot of threats that need to be considered when you're making a purchase like this that you need to explore when you're buying a business.
And there's different levels inside of this, right? I have a friend who he owned a home investors franchise in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And then one day I asked him, I said, "How come when everybody else starts a franchise, like somebody started one in Oklahoma City, they worked for him for 4 or 5 months, or maybe even longer, maybe a year. They would come down and they would work for him in his Tulsa office." He goes, "Well, I own the master franchise for the state. So anytime somebody wants to come here, the way they did, they would set up that they would buy theirs, they go to corporate training, and then they come do a OJT with him, and he helps them get up and running. But he gets a portion of their royalty, and he oversees them, and that he can drive down there and help them anytime they want." A lot of these franchises have that. They have regional or statewide, master franchise licenses. Tell me a little bit about what you know in that realm.
Yeah, they're area developer agreements. They're attractive. I'll tell you, you work really hard because you essentially become like the franchise business consultant for all of those sub franchisees. So it's great for a young guy, but I think it takes away a little bit of the entrepreneurial aspect of owning everything yourself. So you got a lot of partners and you're relying on them. And if they struggle, you struggle. It's not a bad model. I know there are a lot of the foods, the sub shops offer those kind of models. They'll take a district manager and give him ownership in 5 different locations. And now he's got some sweat equity that he can work off of. I say he, but he or she, and it doesn't really matter. The opportunity is there. It's a great for folks that are maybe don't have the capital to get in, but have that opportunity to get into business and grow it, grow net wealth.
So let's talk a little bit about the business underlying, because I know it varies from. I'm sure the Meineke franchise varies from a restaurant, food chains, and stuff like that. But what did I look for things where the profit margin is so high it's ridiculous, so that if I screw it up, there's a lot of room for me to mess up, right? I know I fluctuate, so I'm when I look at business, the reason why I own newsletters and I own blogs, and when the wife's talking about wanting to own a food truck, there are certain food trucks that have high profit margins, right? Things that, there's certain ones that don't. The average food truck profit margin across the board is 6.5%. I'm not interested in that. There's a few of them out there that run 40, 50, 60% profit margin, and it's typically funnel cakes and weird stuff that's like the food cost is really low and your biggest
Right.
expense is labor. Let's talk about across the board, what franchises out there have the best profit margins? How profitable can one of these franchises be? I know like a McDonald's works franchise and some of these gas stations, they make pretty good cash per year. But if somebody had a target, right, they're living in an area where like I'm living in California to live here comfortably, probably need about $250,000 a year for a salary between a family of four. How many franchises would I need to buy to clear that
Yeah.
type of net profit? Hey there, How to Exit family. Today, I'm thrilled to talk about Snowball, our incredible new sponsor. This community is more than just an investment hub. It's a place where growth is holistic. A private community where top entrepreneur investors share private deal flow, wins, tough lessons, strategies, get advice, and so much more. Snowball is a network rich with like minded, experienced entrepreneurial minds, including investors, founders, CEOs, and doers, all dedicated to meaningful growth. Snowball threads are like a daily masterclass. This isn't just about financial success, it's about enriching your entire life. If you're looking for a community that supports your entire entrepreneurial journey with shared wisdom and collective support, check out www.snowballclub.com. I believe their approach to compounded growth in wealth, health, network, and relationships could be the game changer you've been seeking. Let's grow together with Snowball.
It's a great question. It's a loaded question,
Yeah.
for sure. I find that the lowest risk opportunities that have great margins are the mobile type brands. So it's a little counterintuitive to what I said earlier, where you have
Mm,
the best opportunity to grow net wealth by having brick and mortar opportunities because you own real estate, and that's a whole different investment models, right?
mm,
But there's a franchise out there, you mentioned food truck, called Donut Envy. They've got a great model. It's not the cheapest one to get into, but great margins because they've got that donut in a bag and coffee model that works really well. It's a mobile truck. They have a taco truck. Capital Tacos is another one where, it's a food truck and they are profitable and highly profitable. But you are an operator. Those models are not necessarily employee based. And it really depends on you as a franchise investor. Do you want to run an organization and build an empire? Or do you want to be, more of a mom and pop franchisee where you're an owner operator and working in your store every day? And both models are fine. I can tell you that when I started as an owner operator working every day, literally 7 days a week, learning the business and delivering that customer expectation and then added a second store. Well, guess what? Now I need two store managers and I'm bouncing back and forth between locations. But the home service brands where there's a couple of, believe it or not, there's a franchise that just does grout repair. Sir Grout. It's a franchise, where they go in and they clean grout and they replace grout in bathrooms. Highly, highly profitable model. Power washing homes. There's a couple of businesses out there that do gutters as well. The gutter trucks, they actually fabricate right on their truck. So again, not a brick and mortar franchise, but they do fabrication model. And when you can fabricate, you're eliminating a middleman rather than going out to buy a gutter and then install it. Basically manufacturing right on site. So, those kind of services are really profitable. Back in the day when Meineke was Meineke Discount Mufflers, before they got involved with car care and before exhaust systems went to stainless steel, we had pipe ending machines. And we were buying straight pipe for, I want to say about $7 for a 10-foot stick. And we were making tailpipes and selling those for 40 and $50 a piece with that same, you know,
I
$10,
remember.
$7 stick.
I was
Yeah.
like I
So
still
that
think
you're
of
talking,
that.
oh my God.
When you say
I'm
Meineke, I
sorry.
still think muffler repair because I'm old enough. My
Yeah.
'78 Rally Sport Camaro, I remember going in and having the system replaced, right? So, I had a
A
friend
lot
that
of
worked at
money, a lot of
Meineke.
money in custom exhaust work.
Yeah. I had a friend at Meineke, and one of the local ones, I'm gonna get him in trouble now, but it's been 50, 40, 30, 40 years now. It's been in the 88, 89, I guess would have been the time frame, right? But he custom made one. He set a straight pipe right through a muffler for me, so it looked like it had mufflers on it, but it was straight pipe for my Rally Sport Camaro. So,
Right.
yeah, it looks if you crawl underneath it, you looked underneath it, it looked fine, but man, it was louder than normal. So, he do custom work for a lot of us. He went straight from my header, straight through bent it like it fit all where it fit, but when it came to go through the muffler, we bought some off the shelf mufflers and went straight through them for me.
There's a good example, Ron, of what you were talking about before with being part of a franchise model.
Hmm,
If you were a mom and pop muffler shop, you probably went out of business. But because you're part of a franchise like Meineke, when the exhaust business evaporated because of stainless steel, they transitioned over to Meineke Car Care Center. And now they're introducing brakes and oil changes and other services. Now they actually do deep automotive repairs, which is probably not a model that I would be attracted to today, but they were nimble and they had the R&D team at the corporate office that enabled them to prepare to move the chain to a different direction and pivot to something that was able to keep them sustainable. So they completely changed their business model and fortunately didn't become blockbuster.
right. That's a benefit of that too. I mean, because they can when they move, they can actually move to the other profitable. Mufflers when they did mufflers are probably one of the most profitable things they could have done. And then
That's
like,
right.
okay, mufflers are going away. What do we need? Well, brakes would probably be good and profitable. Like we're exchanging labor. Oil changes. I'm not into car care at all, but owning a Jiffy Lube would probably be something I wouldn't mind doing if I don't want to work 50, 60 hours a week again. As long as it's something I can get the training and within the first year I could have somebody else there. I'd be interested in something like that, right? Because I know that.
Oh, you can see my shirt,
Yep,
Victory Lane, quick oil change.
yep,
I still that's one of the franchises that I highly promote.
mhm,
It's the great margins in those, but again, it is a real estate model as well.
yeah. And I'm a real estate guy by previous trade, but mostly on the residential side. So I think it's a brilliant model to use and leverage, and a lot of people don't get this too, that, if you want you can leverage that model out too. You can choose and pick which locations you want to continue to own the real estate, and then I teach something and have people a whole team around what's called a sell leaseback. You could actually sell leaseback some of those locations to expand your growth if you pick the locations that mean the most to you, so you have a real estate holding in your long-term portfolio, but if you needed some cash to buy another franchise or something like that, there's some creative ways where you could secure that real estate, put it with an investor that would work with you on a sell leaseback, and then pull a premium price off the market for it and redeploy that cash.
That's right.
Let's talk about what's the variety inside, and I know the answer to this, but I want people to hear it. The variety inside of franchising models and franchising opportunities. For instance, I'll give you one. I never thought of this, but I worked so much even in my previous when I had my real estate portfolio and my real estate investment company. Everything I did was mobile. I had mobile mechanics come to my house. For one, I blew two tires of weirdest thing. I blew two tires. One of them blew out on the way home. I got it changed. When I got there, by the time I woke up in the morning, I had nails in two other tires. So I lost three tires overnight, basically. I called around and found a mobile tire repair place, and they brought new tires on that had the tire changing device in the truck. And they pulled, multiple tires off of it, pulled the tire off the rim because they were pretty messed up, and replaced tires for me right there on our farm. So I think there's such an opportunity. Talk about the different variety that there is of franchises out there.
Sure. Yeah. So, like that mobile tire changing, work really well in conjunction with a home base. So they get dispatched, but it's really hard to do the volume you need to make any money because how many of those jobs a day can you do driving from site to site? Not a
Right.
lot. So you just don't get the volume, but the variety out there is unbelievable. I mean, even as long as I've been in franchising, I'm astonished every day. There's a franchise out there right now that does crime scene cleanup and hoarder cleanup. And there's a franchise that I visited most recently that does orthotics and prosthetics. And who knew that that was a franchise opportunity? American Family Care, the urgent care centers, that's a franchise. So it's not just the Taco Bells of the world and the Meineke and Victory Lanes of the world. It's just about every industry, every business that you could possibly think of. There's probably a franchise model for it. That's why working with a franchise consultant is so important, because when you start that journey looking for franchise business models, well, what do you want to buy? What are you passionate about? How can we leverage your previous work experience into something that translates over to something that you can use in the franchise model? It could be accounting. It could be customer, home care, senior care, child care, pet care. It's amazing. And, the pet care ones, the mobile pet care ones, are also highly profitable, but they also have the Camp Bow Wows and Dogtopias of the world, but highly expensive to get into. But yeah, the variety is so far. It's infinite almost.
What's the price? You've mentioned that a couple times, highly expensive to get into. So that's a very subjective term, right? Highly expensive to you might be different than highly expensive to some of the people listening to the show. So what's the price range that people are looking at to get into a proven, not a brand new one, because I know there's some brand new ones that are pretty low cost, but what a decent proven franchise model, what's the price range for somebody would be looking to get into?
So we'll look at pet care for a moment. So you can do a mobile dog training franchise, and you can get into that for 150,000 dollars. You can own a doggy daycare center that needs 5,000 square feet. And by the time you do all the build out, you could be north of $1 million. So, and not own the real estate. So that's where the disparity lies. So when I'm talking to an investor, what are you comfortable with as far as, your investment choice here? Would you want to be more conservative and, have a less expensive franchise to invest in? I mentioned to you earlier about an Army veteran that I put in a mobile automotive detailing franchise called Grizzly Automotive Detailing. The guys that run that company are all Army veterans. So it was a natural introduction for me. But he didn't really have the money to invest a heck of a lot to get into business, but he had enough to get involved with them. So that's why I made that introduction.
Mm,
It wasn't something that he was thinking about. He was thinking more about an apparel type franchise, shirt
yeah.
production and that kind of stuff. But after the introduction and after he did Discovery Day and did his due diligence, he moved forward and bought a franchise down in Florida. So it really works on a lot of different fronts. So I know it's kind of a long answer. I hope I answered your question the right way.
I think you did, it depends on the situation, and it ranges from probably there are some out there that are in the high 5 figures and then all the way up to, like, if you wanna I think if you wanna open a McDonald's, you gotta have a couple $1,000,000, right? Theirs is probably the most expensive.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A is way up there. There are some brands that if you have a lot of furniture, fixtures, and equipment, you're buying, and a lot of the automotive in the world, the restaurants, you're buying ovens, you're buying lifts and machinery. An alignment rack nowadays costs, 100,000 plus. So when you get an alignment on your car and you're griping about spending 79 bucks for an alignment, understand that there's a lot of money invested to be able to do that alignment the right way with the right technology.
Yeah, it takes them a long time to replace a couple
Yeah,
100 grand
yeah.
worth of equipment with 79 bucks per visit. The model is incredibly diverse. I love that pretty much anybody that comes to you with varied background and skills, there's just so many different things you can put in front of them. So I don't think that there's ever going to be a situation where somebody comes to you and goes, "There's just not a franchise model that will fit something I'm good at." What are some of the better and hotter things growing right now? You've been doing this for long enough. I've got another question I'll ask you here in a minute, but what are some of the like if you got the money, this is the franchise to be in. They're growing like mad. The stores are doing really well. Like for me, I've seen these bubble teas popping up everywhere, and I looked at the model. They're basically making powder and water into something they sell for 4 or $5. It's gotta be extremely high profit margin, right? But they're popping up so much now there's 2 or 3 on every and you go to a big city, there's 2 or 3 on every city block.
Yeah, there's a couple of brands out there that are franchise models for mental health,
Mhm.
and they seem to be really hot. People are really gobbling them up. One brand is pretty much sold out in the entire country. Another brand is going because of the other one being sold out. The other one's going really fast. Even the men's health one, there's a brand out there called Game Day.
Mhm.
where, the men's health opportunities for low T levels and things like that seem to be really popular. These IV bars where people go in and get IV hookups for nutrients and for vitamins and whatnot, they seem to be getting more and more popular. I think that some of the real estate models where you do a real estate management are also very, very attractive to franchisees. There's some expense reduction analysis franchise models that are out there. I
Mhm.
like them a lot because they're home based. The franchisor does all the analytics, and the franchisee basically works as a representative of their company, where they'll go into a company and say, "Hey, I see you running this company here. If I can save you money on your monthly expenses, it doesn't cost anything to run the analytics, but if I can save you money, we share in that savings." And that's a very low investment, high profit. In fact, one of those brands that I know of, that franchise model sold, and now this is in New York, but he sold for 4.75 million on a flip. So, and this is a brand that costs less than 100 grand to get into. So, they're out there.
Some of those, I'm very familiar with those. Actually, I looked at those. I have a friend who does one in that realm, cost segregation. You know what that is?
Mhm.
So they do research and development, tax. They basically look at your business, and he doesn't do the work. He's a sales guy. The problem I see with his model and the model of the cost segregation is it's such an unknown topic. It's a tough sell for him. A lot of people think that he goes and he's been doing it for years. He gets them done, but it's just not an easy sell for him. Even like when he goes to the CPAs and stuff and explains what he does, because they don't know it and they don't do it all the time. They think there's something up with it. The other model you were talking about where they save money on, they analyze all the errors and stuff in the electric bills and the audit all the bills and stuff, and they find errors and clean that up. I've always thought that I looked at those, and the reason I didn't do it, and it still hasn't been this, it was a fallacy I had 10 years ago. I looked at that, and when I was in between starting businesses, I almost bought one, and I said, you know what? With computers getting the way they are, that's all going to go away. All these errors are going to eventually going to go away, and it's not true. They're still there. So I'm
Yeah.
curious as to do you see is that a continuing operation? It's kind of like the IV bars. That intrigues me because I think it's very basically you got a good location, but as far as equipment and stuff, it's got to be low cost. The cost of goods sold is really low. You're buying, vitamins and saline basically, or whatever the solution that's been put in. It's
Yeah.
like water, right? Filtered water. That said, liability might be high because you can blow somebody's vein out or do something weird. I'm historically hard to poke. So when I go to the local vampires, when I go to the VA, I call them the local vampires because they draw more blood than any doctor I've ever seen. You can't
Yeah.
go to the VA without getting 6 or 8 vials of blood pulled from you. They have to stick me 2 or 3 times most of the time just 'cause I'm just hard to stick. So I could see the difference inside of that model as to is it a trend, though? I would go buy an IV bar if I thought it'd be around for 25 years, and people are still gonna want the IV treatments. There's been many a times where I wish there was one nearby here because I'm dehydrated, I know it, I've been sick for a couple days, and it's just like, I don't wanna go to the ER and tell them that 'cause I gotta sit there for 6 hours to get an IV, but I would pay $100 to somebody to just I know I'm dehydrated, I just know it. I can tell by, I'm dizzy when I stand up and stuff. I'll just go get an IV somewhere, but I look for it, there's not one nearby.
Yeah.
It
Those are recurring revenue models. So you become a member.
Yeah,
So you go in once a week or whatever, you pay a monthly fee. So yeah, so they're pretty interesting. The problem that with a lot of those is occupancy costs
mhm.
because you need to have the right location and you need to understand the metrics or the unit economics for the business. So if you've got a 10 or a 15% dedicated budget for occupancy cost and your rent is $10,000 a month, well, you better be doing $100,000 a month in sales to hit that 10% rent rate. So that's where, you just got to be careful with some of those brands.
I used to visit a mobile dentist. The dentist would come to our when I this is back when in '97 when I worked for Lockheed Martin. The mobile dentist was a big fancy RV, and you walk inside of it, and you had 2 dental chairs. Him and another dentist worked out of this big fancy converted RV. I think the IV bar could be the same thing. You could, take one of these limousine party shuttle buses
Yes.
that have all the limousine seating that's really high end, and go park somewhere and just have a Facebook app that says, "Here's a GPS location for today," and people stop by and just kinda centrally park yourselves in different locations. Then you lose the rent, you lose all that, and I think there's a model behind that. That's something I might look into.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those require a nurse practitioner or a
Yeah.
registered nurse to do that, especially if you're doing Botox and that kind of stuff. So it limits the audience of folks that can purchase that kind of franchise. Or I don't say it limits the audience, but you need to know that you need to hire those kind of folks that can do that kind of stuff.
Same way with I think that mental health one, right? You'd have to hire psychiatrists or
Counselors,
psychologists,
clinicians.
yeah, clinicians,
Yeah.
somebody who's got a license to practice mental health. But, a lot of the businesses we look at are the same way, right? We look at things like elder care. I think there's probably a lot of franchises in the elder care, memory care facilities. There you have to have,
Mhm.
most of the time, the operator isn't the licensed clinician that does memory care. They own the real estate, they hire in all the people. I interviewed a guy, it came out yesterday actually, or, day before yesterday. He buys those elder care facilities and stuff. He has $100 million fund where he does multiple acquisitions per month. He owns them across multiple states. He's not a memory care guy, but, he owns drug and he's not a drug rehab guy, but he owns veterans homes and that type of stuff. I think that there's an opportunity for any of this. I mean, tell me if correct me if I'm wrong, but there's franchise opportunities in all those areas, right?
Of course, senior care is one of the most popular
Yeah.
nowadays. I mean, 10,000 people a day turn 65. And I've probably got 10 different senior care brands in my inventory.
Mhm.
I've got over 500 brands in my inventory of franchises, but the senior care one, very, very popular. And a lot of them, they sell out their territories as well. Yeah. So that's a very, very popular model.
When you move from being the Meineke operator to doing what you're doing now, one of the ways I would have thought about, like, my mind would go, if I had your experience, I would look for companies like now we're acquiring manufacturing companies and stuff like that. I'm on a advisory role in a franchise. I'm not a franchise roll up, but a manufacturing roll up. And I think there's an opportunity to look out there for companies that are ripe for being franchised. Did you consider that at all? Like, there's companies out there where they've got 2 or 3 locations already. They're really well vetted. Their system and processors out. And the only thing they haven't done is pull the trigger, do the, state franchising board paperwork and do all the hundreds. It's not cheap. It's the hundreds of thousands of dollars to license themselves as a franchise to start moving themselves to that model. Did you consider that when you moved from owning the franchises to doing what you're doing now?
Not really, but what I have done is counseled folks that want to do that. I mean, I've been working with one in particular. I had an hour session with them yesterday. They have a new franchise. They filed their franchise disclosure document with the Federal Trade Commission, and they are launched officially. They don't have any franchises yet, but the concept is aircraft detailing. So yeah, so they work side by side with FBOs. It's a mobile brand,
Mhm,
so they run out of their vans and they dispatch to local airports. And a lot of these private jets need to be detailed. No different than getting your car detailed. They've
mhm.
already got a proven business model. They've been in place for 20 years, and now they decided to expand it into franchising. So I have consulted with them and helped them along the way to get to that point, all the way up to and including attending the International Franchise Association convention last month in Phoenix. And they attended, they loved it, and they're on their way. So yeah, as far as investing in it, I just haven't really thought about it. I'm at that point in my career with 7 grandchildren. They seem to be my main focus, to be honest with you.
I got it, I got it. One of the reasons I don't, like, wanna buy something where I have to pull 60, 70-hour work weeks myself is I have an 8-year-old and a 13-year-old. My 13-year-old just got into basketball. I don't miss a game. My daughter on Tuesday, I guess it was, we took my son to a thing to check out some boxing. He really liked it, and my daughter wanted to join in, and then, like, now my daughter, 8-year-old daughter is doing boxing, which is cool. I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
But I want to be there if they've got a match or they say they get good at that and they're gonna get in the ring. I wanna be on the ring side cheering on. I wanna be cheer daddy. I don't wanna be, "Oh, I've got this big business thing going on. I can't come to your game." My dad was that way, and I'm just not interested in it. That said, I also wanna be an entrepreneur. I wanna grow wealth and leave something to the kids, so I'm always looking for the balance of what can I get my hands on and work with and have great operators in there, and I'm just the oversight. Right?
Mhm.
And I think that model's fairly alive inside of the franchising model, especially if you buy existing units that need to be turned around, right? Yeah, you gotta put your feet on the ground for a little while and get it up and smoothed out, get the right business owner in, but you've proven the model where there's no way you could have managed personally being the GM for 15 or 20 units. You had to put good people in the right spot and then oversee that. That's how you did what you did. So there's a lot more opportunity in this space than people give the franchising world community, or what do you want to call it, credit for. Let's talk a little bit about the opportunity for the veterans, right? Because I want to get the word out to all my fellow veterans who maybe are having a hard time working for other people, right? They're not systemized enough. They don't have enough organization. A lot of these times we get hired as veterans onto startups and stuff, and it's a little chaotic for us. I think this franchising opportunity is could be a gold mine for a lot of these guys. Talk about what's out there and how the Vet Friend and the other organizations can help give them the skills they need, because I know you guys have educational opportunities also.
Sure. Yeah. Again, vetfriend.org is a great place to start. Many franchisors that are members of VetFriend offer significant discounts and opportunities for veterans to get started. And a lot of them are also extending those opportunities to their spouses. So if the veteran is deceased or unable to buy the franchise because of another job situation, the spouse can take advantage of those benefits. The discounts can be applied to not just from a discount on the franchise fee, but there are many vendors. So I've worked with, different suppliers like ExxonMobil and Chevron and those kind of automotive suppliers that will actually extend discounts out to veterans as well, because everybody wants to be part of that. Franchisors are really attracted to veterans. Veterans make up about 7% of the population in the country, but make up 14% of the population of franchisees in the country. So franchisors are highly attracted to veterans. Veterans, again, understanding system of operations and having the discipline to follow that system makes them very attractive for franchisors.
Awesome, awesome. And then it doesn't matter where you live, right? All 50 states. Is a franchising model common for the expats that are out there? We do have people listen to us all around the world. Is franchising something that's common in other places too, or is this just pretty much an America thing?
No, it's common around the world. There's a lot of international type franchise brands that are out there and that are available. Sure.
Okay. So I know we have a lot of listeners in Australia. We got a lot of listeners in the UK. I get guests all the time on here from UK and Dubai and other places. So people come on the show. So just wanted to, not alienate all those guys. I'm sure that if
Yeah.
you're a veteran of that country, if you're a vet, if you were in the UK or and you're a veteran, there's probably organizations the same that we have here. Won't be
I know
vet.
the Canadian the
Good.
Canadian Franchise Association has a vet friend program as well.
Yeah. So for all my international friends, there these same opportunities exist for you. So how do people reach out to you? What is the best way to get a hold of you and start looking at where does somebody start? Like, I kind of want to get started in this. I need to do some research. What's the best way for them to kind of start dipping their toes into do I want to be a franchise owner? Where should they start?
Well, my company is atticusfranchiseconsulting.com. That's a great place to start. You can just click right on there and connect with me and schedule an appointment on my calendar right there. It'll also list all of the over 500 franchises and industries that are in my inventory. I'm part of International Franchise Professionals Group, so which is a company that aggregates franchise consultants like myself and franchisors to be part of their network. So it makes it a lot easier from us from an education standpoint, training standpoint, all of the government things that you need to comply with as well. My cell phone, happy to give it 303-587-6373. Call me, text me. And of course, my email address is Ralph at atticusfranchiseconsulting.com as well.
I'll be sure to put those in the show notes too for those you guys are listening, so you can go back and pull up the show notes and underneath this video or on the podcast channel and that you're listening to. It'll be down in there. So I'll make sure those get there. Give us two or three takeaways. If somebody could remember only two or three different things from today's conversation, what would you want them to remember about franchising and the opportunity it presents?
Well, the three things that stall a franchisee in moving forward are funding, fear, and spouse. So you need to have your spouse highly engaged in what you're doing.
Mhm.
Don't present that to your spouse and tell him or her, "Hey, I decided to buy a franchise at the last minute." Funding, make sure you're working with the right franchise consultant to lead you in the right direction. Maybe you're using 401k rollover money. Maybe you're using a HELOC, but they know who the preferred SBA lenders are to work with, making sure and then the fear or the trepidation that people have, not knowing what they're getting themselves into, understanding the franchisee validation process. Working with a consultant is saves a lot of that trepidation, if you will, gives them the opportunity to have somebody hold their hand and mentor them. I don't sell franchises, and most consultants don't. What we do is teach people how to buy them and make sure that they're focused on something that they're passionate about, that they can see themselves in, whether it's managing people or running it themselves. So having that intimate knowledge and that relationship with your client is really critically important as you help them in that journey.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I want to thank you for being here. I think we've covered the topic fairly well. We'll call that a show and hang out for just a few minutes afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, you bet.
I want to announce our new channel partners, the ITX Marketplace. Since 1998, ITX has created $5 billion in value by selling more than 225 IT businesses in 20 countries. ITX works exclusively with IT-enabled businesses generating between 5 million and 30 million who are ready to be sold, and M&A decision makers who are ready to buy. For over 25 years, ITX has developed industry knowledge that helps determine whether a seller is a good fit for their buyers before making the match. ITX Mergers and Acquisition Marketplace we have partnered with has a proprietary database of 50,000 plus global buyers seeking IT service firms, managed service providers, Microsoft service providers, software as a service platforms, and channel partners with Microsoft, Oracle, ServiceNow, and the Salesforce space. If you have an IT enabled business you're ready to sell, I want you to visit the itexchangenet.com/marketplace. How to exit. That link will be in the show notes. Visit them now.